first of all, I have to say happy birthday to him. I hand over to Professor Emmanuel Nwanze. Over to you, Professor Nwanze.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the birthday wishes. My small talk is titled Yoruba Igbo, Leap Forward More and Look Back Less. For emphasis, I repeat, Yoruba Igbo, leap forward more and look back less. The introduction is that the antecedents of the numerous failed attempts at the unification of the Igbo and Yoruba have been well chronicled by many more competent persons elsewhere. I hope my audio is coming out well. Notable among these is the landmark event of January 18th, 2018, acronym Handshake Across the Niger, HON, which was held in Enugu. The short treatise here, titled Background and Key Themes, provided for us by the convener of this conference, Barrister Dele Ogun, is also very incisive. In particular, the narrative and breakdown of 1, the genesis of the political rivalry, 2, the maintenance of the rivalry, 3, the consequences of the rivalry, and 4, the solutions to the rivalry is pointedly apt. Only in the last paragraph dealing with the solutions to the rivalry do I hold some divergence, which I will dwell with fully in my conclusion. Pedigree. Seeing that this speaker is just a simple folk scientist of the biochemical and neurological sciences, the pertinent question to ask is, am I, Emmanuel Nwanze, qualified in the first place to stand among giants of the humanities and law, history, sociology, and political disciplines to banter such serious issues? Issues for which nations have been known to go to war. Issues indeed for which we ourselves fought a most vicious, no-holds-barred civil war. I refer to the Nigeria-Biafra War between 1967 and 1970, in which well over 2 million souls perished, not to include displacements, etc. My answer to the question posed is an unreserved affirmation. Affirmatively, yes, and that by all accounts, I am this very day, as Madam Chair has observed, this very day, 15th of January, 2021, at 72, a very senior citizen of Nigeria, who, although never been a card-carrying member of any political party in Nigeria, nonetheless have been very keen, albeit alarmed observer during most times of the political somersaults of the Nigerian political class. Moreover, the 10-year span, 1962 to 1972, from when I arrived Loyola College in Ibadan to begin secondary education in 1962 to when I graduated from the University of Ibadan in 1972 and left for Warri for graduate studies, I consider as probably most cherished and certainly most eventful years of my life. It is beyond dispute that Ibadan was a live wire and epicenter of politics in Nigeria. And what was recorded there between 1960 and 1970 epitomized the political theater of the times. Independence in 1960, Operation Wetie and state of emergency by 1962, the 1966 series of coups and pogroms, the 1967 to 1970 Civil War were upheaval galore, pressed down and overflowing for any individual to experience in one's lifetime. Crucial ingredients for a meaningful Yoruba Igbo summit. In order to truly forge ahead meaningfully, we must identify the critical factors as well as notable proponents of such factors wherever they can be found in our common cultures. For ease of presentation and discourse, I intend to consider only 3 such philosophies from among what I'm sure must be a plethora of possibilities. Understandably, because education has been my tuft all these my 72 years of life, I have no hesitation in giving education the primacy of place above the other 2 philosophies. peaceful coexistence, and 3, commerce and industry. Education, especially the type and quality that will produce the Chinua Achebes, Wole Soyinkas, Olarotimis, Vincent Chukwuemeka Ikes, and Chimamanda Adichie's of today, is a sine qua non for nation building. 3, the philosophy of education and its major proponent among Igbo Yoruba culture, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Now, when in 1954, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, as Premier of the then Western region of Nigeria, got the Western Region House of Assembly to pass the bill on compulsory and free primary education in the entire region, his contemporaries in other regions laughed him to scorn. How will it be funded, they queried. It will lead to massive quality flight and resultant drift in standards, they opined. But like the true visionary that he was, Awo persisted and prevailed. The Awo experiment proved beyond reasonable doubt that provided policymakers and economic planners are committed to prudent and frugal planning, the UNESCO recommended appropriation of 26% of GDP for education is easily achievable. But are our leaders genuinely interested in education for all? Rather, it will appear, as can be deduced from the ease with which layabouts and hoodlums were recruited to neutralize and foil the legitimate campaign of the #EndSARS movement earlier this year, that those in charge prefer to stagnate and deny education to the masses while sponsoring subterfuge. Yours truly here in 1955, when my then guardian, Mr. B.O. Nwanze, enrolled me for primary school at Mokola Ibadan, was a direct beneficiary of the Awo free primary education, as it was derogatorily tagged in those days. Now, without meaning to be modest, you can judge for yourselves whether from my academic stroke educational trajectory, the Awo education can be remotely described as inferior. I and many of my contemporaries who benefited from the Awo free primary education went ahead to compete most favorably with the best anywhere and everywhere in the world and at all levels. Philosophers all through the ages have come to recognize the value of education as the glue that binds society and promotes robust societal growth and development. Plato, 428 to 348 BC, observed that, and I quote, "Ignorance is the root and stem of all evil," end of quote. Winston Churchill, 1874 to 1965, noted that, and I quote again, "The truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is," end of quote. Jawaharlal Nehru, 1869 to 1964, wrote that, and I quote again, "Ignorance is always afraid of change," end of quote. The great American philosopher Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910, wrote that, and I quote again, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education," end of quote. And the great scientist Albert Einstein, 1879 to 1955, observed that, and I quote again, "Education is what remains after one has forgotten what one learned at school," end of quote. And coming nearer home, our own Nelson Mandela, 1918 to 2013, recorded that, and I quote again, "Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world," end of quote. Now to myself. So today I say to you, my audience, and to all our leaders, loud and clear, fix education and you have fixed the nation. Indeed, the woes of our nation today, insecurity, Boko Haram, armed robbery, armed banditry, cattle rustling, kidnappings, ritual killings, 419, and all forms of advanced fee fraud, including drug abuse, sexual harassment, and all manners of exam malpractices and misconduct, are all traceable to our collapsed educational system since 1960s. It is almost a doomsday situation. Awo was right, you know, with his declaration of free primary education in 1954. 52 years later, in 2006, at the Commonwealth Ministerial Conference in Cape Town, South Africa, which I was privileged to attend, the Commonwealth pronounced, and I quote, "access to all" as the adopted education policy. So, my dear friends, we must therefore restructure our education now, not tomorrow. 4. The philosopher king of peaceful coexistence. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. John chapter 15, verse 13. This is the spiritual injunction which distinguishes the agape or divine nature of our Lord's love for us. Indeed, for those who abducted Ironsi and Fajiri on July 29, 1966, and demanded unsuccessfully of Fajiri to dishonor himself by handing over his boss and guest, the shame remains theirs even until this day, and even, I dare say, far beyond, eternally. This is what distinguishes, in my mind, and I'm sure it is obvious, and sets aside Colonel Adekunle Fajiri as the greatest of the philosopher kings that have come out of the two cultures of Igbo and Yoruba nation. This outpouring of love at the back of Green Springs Hotel off Iwo Road, Agodi Ibadan, behind Loyola College, where I was at that time with my peers preparing for the 1966 West African School Certificate Examination, should be a most compelling clarion call for Igbos and Yorubas to bury the hatchet and forge ahead. From this conference, on a new course that will define the best practices of coexistence for good governance for generations to come. The historical perspectives and accounts of who caused the failure of previous attempts at rapprochement, or who organized the first carpet crossing, or who and why the Aguri Accord flopped, ought to firmly take the back seat now. No, one is not advocating that these experiences be cast away altogether, as if they never occurred. Rather, they are to be reviewed periodically, if only to remind us of George Santayana's quote that, and I quote, "Those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it." End of quote. This is thus my point of departure from the aforementioned conclusion titled Solutions to the Rivalry in Dele's compilation. I have described the sage Awolowo as a philosopher king. This is very consciously done, and for good reason too, and purely because of the sheer phenomenal and monumental importance of his contributions to education in the nation, which for me, as I said, is sine qua non for the growth, progress, and well-being of any society. By so doing, I'm not unmindful or oblivious of the many policy failures and directives attributed to him as well, such as the 1951 carpet crossing, his defense of starvation as an instrument of war, and so on, for which many Igbo persons will continue to hold him accountable and find it difficult to forgive him. Yet, alas, I say, show me the saint amongst men. Show me the saint among us, our philosopher kings in industry and commerce. Now, if the Yoruba and Igbo cultures are to celebrate anything at all, for which each of them can claim excellence, it is in the fields of enterprise, commerce, and industry. Both cultures have and are still producing men and women of timber and caliber, as the saying goes. Giants of industry and entrepreneurship, such as Sir Louis Odumegojukwu, Chief Timothy Adeola Odutola, and Chief Sonny Dike Odogu of blessed memory, who have left their marks in the sands of time. In contemporary times, names such as Chief Innocent Chukwuma of Innocent Motors, Chief Femi Otedola of Xenon Oil and Gas, Mr. Tony Elumelu of UBA and Hess Holdings, Chief Jim Ovia of Zenith Bank, Oloye Subomit Balogun of FCMB, and myriad others frequently come up. The Igbo Yoruba nation possesses so many of these personages who have invaluable contributions to make to our discourse. We must work out the modalities by which we can consult them and render them inclusive. Finally, my proposal for Fatherland Group to consider and adopt. It is proposed that as a way forward from this inaugural meeting, the Fatherland Group should consider for adoption the principle of defined philosophy domains for which philosopher kings from any axis of Yoruba Igbo culture can be identified. The three domains I have mentioned here of education, peaceful coexistence, and commerce and industry are not necessarily exclusive and can be expanded as considered necessary. What matters is that any philosophy considered and adopted is added as one of the beacons for action. We should work towards identifying serious contenders who will be willing to draw up a blueprint for the union to realize the Igbo Yoruba nation. I thank you for listening to me, but in particular, I thank Mr. Dele Ogun for inviting me to be part of this wonderful event. Thank you and God bless.